is almost like a continuation of our topic the last time. So, for those who are joining us for the first time, we will begin with the recitation of the Apostolic Creed. After the recitation of the Apostolic Creed, we'll have just 15 to 20 minutes presentation of the topic, and then we'll ask questions, make our own contribution. When making your contribution, remember that others should have the time to talk, so you don't spend all the time talking. So with that, we're able to utilize the next 1 hour for our study session on the Catholic faith as part of our activities here on this first Sunday of the month. So I will encourage us now to rise. Let's take the Apostolic Creed before we continue with the study session. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, His only Son, our Lord, who was conceived of the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. On the third day rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven, and is still at the right hand of the Father. God living and dead, I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. Let's be seated. So today, the topic is the appropriate baptismal name. Appropriate baptismal name. Many of us have the experience of having to argue with the catechist or even the priest of the name to be used for the baptism of our children or our own baptism. And the position sometimes that some persons take and that we hear all the time is that before you can baptize, your name must be the name of a saint, your name must reflect a Christian name, and so on and so forth. So, our topic today will enable us to know the current position of the church on this issue of name for baptism. As we brought to our mind last time on what baptism is, we said, following the teaching of the church, baptism is a sacrament which cleanses us from original sin, makes us Christians, children of God, and members of the church. This membership of the church makes baptismal name very important and relevant, because whenever you belong to an association or you belong to a community, there is need for you to have a particular identity as a person in that community. Baptism initiates us into the body of Christ. It initiates us into Christian community. So there is need for us as individuals in that Christian community to have our own identity. When you enter the university, you do matriculation and you are given a matriculation number. That matriculation number is very important because that is what distinguishes you in that university. That is your identity in that university. So that any communication you are required to make with the university, you need to quote your matriculation number. So when you write your examination, it's even better for you to forget your name and write your matriculation number than to forget your matriculation number and write your name. So the matriculation number is very important. So it is with other communities. As a citizen in Nigeria or any other country, you are supposed to have your identity card, and that card carries a number. When you start to deposit money in a bank and you have a bank account, you have bank verification number. So it is in the church. When belonging to that community, there is a need for you to have an identity. And that is the relevance of baptismal name. The baptismal name is so important in our Christian life that when we are celebrating other sacraments, the baptismal name is very relevant, even when we are celebrating other sacraments after baptism. Since baptism is a gateway to other sacraments, the baptismal name that we have from baptism is also important when celebrating other sacraments after. So, baptismal name as a Catholic, as a Christian, is our identity in the community. Now, how do we determine the appropriate name for baptism? Before 1983, to be specific, in the 1917 Code of Canon Law, it was required that before the name you present will be accepted for baptism, that name will either be the name of a saint or the name will reflect Christian virtue. For instance, faith, hope, charity, patience, love. These may not be names of specific saints, but they reflect Christian virtues. So, from the 1917 Code, it was mandatory that before a name will be accepted for baptism as a baptismal name, that name will reflect these Christian virtues or direct names of existing or already professed saints. However, with the 1983 Code of Canon Law, there is a change. There is a change. First of all, you can now understand why those who tell you that it must be the name of a saint where they are coming from. You will know that, first of all, they are not making it up. You will know the background they are talking from, and you will know the law from which they are talking from. However, it is good for you to know that that law has been changed since 1983. And the new law says parents, sponsors, and the pastor are to take care that a name foreign to Christian sensibility is not given. So, what the code is saying now, and the changes it has brought about now, is that you don't need the name to be the name of a saint anymore. It does not have to be a defined Christian virtue for it to be accepted. What it needs to be is that it is not offensive to Christian faith. It does not contradict Christian faith. How do we determine that? When you have a name that is considered neutral, for instance, someone comes forward and says, my name for baptism is Stone. It looks neutral. That is to say, it's not the name of a saint, because there's no saint you know as Saint Stone. And stone is not part of the Christian virtues that you know about, like charity, faith, love, patience, and so on and so forth. What the new code is saying is that as long as the word stone does not contradict the Christian faith, you are to accept it. There is no contradiction between names that seem to be neutral and our Christian faith, like water, like sun, like which other one again now? We come up with some names, and then you ask the person, what's the meaning of the name? As long as the meaning does not sound offensive or does not contradict Christian faith, that name should not be rejected. How do you know what contradicts the Christian faith? A very good example, like the Benin tradition, you have names like Ogun Sei. If you look at the meaning of Ogun Sei, it is offensive to the Christian faith, because it is not Ogun that is saying, it is Osa. So instead of Ogun Sei, you have Osa Sei. You see the difference? And that is offensive to the Christian name. Another one that I can think about now, even in the Igbo tradition, well, it depends on how you understand it. A name like Onwoboya. As Christians, we say death is not suffering. It's not annihilation. It's a transition from this life to the world to come. So when someone comes now and says Onwoboya as baptismal name, there's a question mark already. What does the person understand by that name, Onwoboya? What is that name teaching in the Igbo tradition? Does it correspond to what the Christian faith talks about death? That is why when we are accepting any name for baptism, especially from the tradition of the people or the culture of the people, there is need to understand what the meaning of that name is in the culture of the people. And the rite of Christian initiation of adults, number 73, makes it very clear that when you have a name like that from the culture, you should give Christian interpretation to that name instead of changing the name. You should give Christian interpretation to that name instead of changing the name. So if someone comes and says his name is Okuta, for instance, stone, you now ask the person, what do you understand? Why are you bearing that name? What message is that name giving to you? If the message the name gives to that person contradicts what the Christian faith is supposed to give to the person, all you need to do is to catechize the person and give a Christian meaning to that faith instead of changing the name to another name. So it doesn't have to be an English name, it doesn't have to be the name of a saint, and it doesn't have to be the name of a clear clearly defined Christian virtue. All you need for that name to be accepted is that the name is not offensive to the Catholic faith. And when we look at this new law also from the 1983 code, we'll see that it gives the parents the responsibility of naming the child, as against the old law of 1917 code that gives the responsibility of naming a child to pastors or to priests. Maybe that is why in some cultures you still have people calling the priest to come and do naming ceremony of the child. You can see where they are coming from. When someone tells you the name must be the name of a saint, you see where the person is coming from. But what the 1983 code is doing, has done for us, is that it gives that responsibility to the parents. That is why at baptism, when you bring forth the child, the priest asks you, what name do you give to the child? Presuming that you have decided on the name before now. And then, for Christian initiation of adults, it will ask you, what name have you chosen to be called? Presuming that you already have a name before now. So, for baptism, as it is now, the naming of a child is the responsibility of the parents. And when choosing that name, they can follow their culture. They can follow any name that they feel is appropriate for that child, as long as it does not sound offensive to the Catholic faith. Furthermore, when you have a name given to a child, since that name is an identity in the Christian fold, the name is supposed to tell something, to like give a message also to the one who bears the name. Just as you have in your matriculation number. When you see the number, you know the session, you know when the person entered the university, you know the number of that person in that class. So it says something about the person. So when you have a name, it's not just for you to give the name like that, arbitrarily. The name is supposed to pass a message to the person who bears that name. That is why it says, if the message the name is passing is offensive to the Christian faith, you should now give Christian meaning or give a Christian message through that name. That is to tell us that although the law has said it's not compulsory that you bear the name of a saint or the name that expresses Christian virtues, that is not to say that those who now want to bear the name of saints, or it's no longer appropriate to have the name of a Christian virtue as baptismal name. As a matter of fact, it still remains the preferred name, because when you have the name of a saint, you are able to pass a message to that child. When the child is growing up, the child will have the saint as a mentor, as a patron saint. And when that name reflects a Christian virtue, the child will be motivated towards that virtue because of that name. At the same time, if you have names which express other forms of virtues and other things that are good in our tradition and in our culture, it's also acceptable as long as the name tells something to that child. In our cultures, we know that we don't just give names anyhow. Names express the circumstances with which that child is born. So when you look at the name of someone, you can tell somehow the history around the birth of that child. So in our Christian life, when you also give a name, the name should be able to express something. So even if you have chosen stone, you have chosen cloth and the name of the person, you should be able to ask yourself, why are you choosing stone? What explanation are you giving to the child for choosing stone? So that when the person hears his or her name, the child will be motivated by something, by the meaning of that name. So that is why in as much as the new code has removed that obligation of choosing the name of a saint or a Christian virtue, the practice of giving Christian meaning to any name chosen, whether English name or a name from our culture, is still very much important and needed in our Christian life today. So, in summary, for you to choose a name, it does not have to be the name of a saint, and it does not have to be the name arising from a Christian virtue. It does not have to be an English name. Thank you. So, first of all, many of us have our experiences, and especially from, it's a catechist you meet all the time when you want to do your infant baptism. So from my experiences and from sometimes even catechism classes, when they are telling us the name to choose, of course, you know that whatever they have told you now is not out of it's not out of wickedness, it's not being too strict, it's what they understand by what the law said those days. And many of them were trained by priests also, who were trained under those laws. It was only in 1983 that it was changed, that you can choose any name. So from our experiences, we have contributions, we have questions as regards the name for baptism. Yes.